On March 26, Wise Road Capital announced a $1.4 billion plan to acquire Magnachip. What's your view on this acquisition?
Well, right now we're going through market consolidation, and so there's a lot of acquisition activity at the moment as companies try to lock in their supply chain. The pandemic scared the market quite a bit, and as a result, these large suppliers are trying to lock up manufacturing capacity. So if there are any future problems, they're not left without product because they don't have their own capacity.
Chinese companies are facing extremely strict examination while doing cross-border M&A. Do you think this acquisition can still go through under such pressure?
Well, it's going to be problematic. I mean, the concern with the West is that the Chinese companies are too close with the Chinese government, and there's a concern that as a result, the products will get compromised, and they don't want those compromised products in their portfolios because they feel they might be held liable for any resulting exploits. And so that's what's really driving this. It's not so much the evidence of bad things that have been done, it's the belief that bad things will be done and they'll have no way to prevent them. The current administration is a little bit more liberal than the last one in the United States, but there's still this large concern about the Chinese military and what it is they might do to products unbeknownst to their Western customers. And so that concern is what's driving the behavior. We've gone through waves of this in the past. In the early 2000s, we had other instances of this as well. And there were certainly a lot of concerns that the US military, or at least the US law enforcement agencies, were going to penetrate US products and do much the same thing, which did the US companies a great deal of damage in the early 2000s. It's generally just companies get really nervous when the government of a particular country gets really close to a company that's applying technology across borders. Korea is pretty much neutral. And so the handy thing about Korea is they might be able to bridge the problem. We've certainly seen that Lenovo was able to bridge this problem by going to a much more international form of governance. And they probably perform the best example of how you might address this. Make sure your governance is international. And so at least it appears that you can resist inroads from either of the major governments, US or China, into doing something improper. And so that's worked there. My expectation is it could work equally well with South Korea.
How would global semiconductor market be affected if this acquisition could be done?
If, in fact, this acquisition appears to be reducing the influence of potential influence of the Chinese government on the manufacturing side, this should open it up to more of a global market. It shouldn't have an adverse impact on the company in China, but a positive impact on company sales outside of China if it's done properly. It's just a question of a lot of these things, because the concerns are based on rumor and belief, not based on fact. It's hard to determine what the impact will be unless they can address these kinds of rumors. And so far, not a lot of companies have been very effective at addressing the rumors, but it should be a positive upside in terms of sales to the West as a result. It looks to be a bargain because most of the Chinese manufacturing companies, particularly companies that are building technology, are bound to China. And if through your purchase, you can remove that bounding, you can increase the profitability of the entity a lot, make it worth a lot more. And that's kind of the best bet in terms of an acquisition. You want the acquisition to be worth more as a result of you acquiring it, as opposed to the other way around. You know, most acquisitions actually go the other way. When you acquire the company, it actually loses a substantial amount of value that then needs to be made up. But when you're talking about one of these cross-border problems, and you're talking about an acquirer that's outside of that border dispute area, then there's a substantial potential upside, which can justify the acquisition because you're basically buying something at a discount that will be worth more as a result of your purchase.
There are some local concerns in Korea worrying that cross-border acquisition could lead to technology leakage. Do you share the same opinion?
I don't think so. The major companies recognize that they need to protect their IP, and they do a significant job in terms of making sure they can do that. China itself has improved quite a bit over the years in terms of IP protection as well. It's not the wild west it once was, where if you did any business through or in China, you pretty much bet your IP was going to be stolen. Now that doesn't happen quite as often, or often at all, really, and largely due to the fact that China has its own IP to protect now, and if it doesn't protect the IP of others, it can't protect its own. So the environment's improved a great deal in that regard, and because we do so much manufacturing in China now, I think most of the major companies recognize there are ways to protect the IP and use, as long as you're using mainstream, large scale Chinese firms that have a reputation to protect IP.